For those of you who are just joining us, if you wouldn't mind placing your name and your institution and the Native Nation that you are with, if so, in the chat, that way we can all get to know each other. And we'll go ahead and get started now. Okay. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Bluestone Strategy Partners, we wanted to give you a little bit of a background in our the expansion of our line of service and the history of this native-owned firm. We've been around for 18 years. Actually, we're going into our 19th year. We've served over 225 native nations with over 1,000 projects, ranging from economic development and diversification and workforce planning to human resources, healthcare and tribal clinics, and tribal governance. We use a variety of subject matter experts who have direct involvement with our Native nations. And you can see their mission here is to provide the premier tribal economic development and government advisory services. This is our full listing of everything we do. You can see workforce development right there at the top. And while I'm on this slide, I'm going to pause for a moment and introduce, I am here with a couple of my colleagues, Mr. Jameson Savage and also Ms. Janine Gordon. Thank you for joining us. And let's see here. I also see Ms. Alicia Finley on the line as well from Human Resources. Thank you for joining us this morning. All right, let's jump into some more technical information. All right. So with this new line of work with Bluestone Strategy Partners, we are looking to build the tribal workforce of the future. Those of you who are on the line who have been working with Native nations at TCUs for however long know that this is not a one size fits all, right? And we can say that across post-secondary. However, when it comes to tribal colleges and universities, there is a specific context and nuance to what we're doing in tribal lands. It's certainly, for as much as there are synergies across what TCUs and rural community colleges work within, there are certainly many more differences. And so as you see here, we've been developing a theory of change that includes connectivity across TCUs as well as tribal councils, taro offices, tribal enterprises, and your regional economic partners. Partnership in the 21st century in 2026 is going to be key moving forward with regard to any type of resource generation or work-based learning program. So we're really focusing on that approach to partnerships and connectivity and ensuring that TCUs are at the table, driving the agenda just as much as our more populated partners. One of the things that we are kicking off this line of work with is a new project for rural and tribal economic development toolkits that are tailored to tribal colleges, rural and tribal colleges. So as Bluestone moves forward in 2026, we will be launching our new nonprofit arm, the Center for Advancing Rural and Tribal Economies. And in particular, this is going to be one of our kickoff projects. We've already begun this, and for those of you who are on the line, we appreciate you being here. And I will ask towards the end of this if you are interested in being a partner in this project. We're going to focus on researching the contextual needs of tribal colleges and universities. We're going to start this with two surveys. Our partners, as you can see there on the right, are the Rural Community College Alliance, Indigo Impact Initiative, and funded through the ECMC Foundation. So for those of you who are interested in being part of this research project, please put a little note into the chat. We will follow up with you. And I'll mention this again a little later for those of you coming in a couple minutes late. But again, we're focusing on understanding how rural and tribal colleges engage with their employers, with industry sectors and particularly industry sector partnerships. We all know that we are in the midst of a substantial shift in post-secondary education at the federal level. We are looking at multiple programs shifting from Department of Education over to Department of Labor. We are looking at workforce Pell requirements and parameters that are new to us, and most particularly advisory boards. Those requirements for Perkins advisory boards, we might see a substantial shift in. I suspect that it will shift more towards industry sector partnerships. So we want to make sure that our TCU partners are at the hub of that workforce ecosystem and not left out on the sidelines. So that's when we talk about industry sector partnerships, and we'll talk about that a little later. It's really a model that could conceivably build upon and scale the traditional advisory board meeting. And then, of course, we're absolutely focused on the connectivity between our TCUs and regional workforce systems, recognizing that there's probably been barriers in the past. I know I've worked with several different workforce systems, some of them fantastic, others not so much. And we want to make sure that our TCUs are armed with the information they need to participate fully in the agenda setting for those workforce systems. That is going to be imperative as we move forward in this, again, 21st century with regard to resource generation. Secondly, we want to explore entrepreneurship, recognizing that one of the biggest challenges in Indian country and for our TCUs and our rural college partners is the limited economic opportunity. Myself, I stepped into this and didn't introduce myself quite fully, but I have a strong background in working in post-secondary. I ran economic and workforce development divisions for 12 years at rural colleges. Mostly next to Native nations as well. And I specialize in tribal and rural economic and workforce development. One of the ways that we can build opportunity, and I know that it's not a shocker to anybody in this webinar right now, is entrepreneurship. So building from the ground up, I used to run small business development centers and spent a little time at the SBA and recognized that we need capital, we need counseling, and we need government contracting in order to supply for those needs in our local communities. And so entrepreneurship is an opportunity to not just provide a career and educational path for our learners, but also to support our local economies. So we're going to be partnering with the Rural Community College Alliance to distribute these surveys in the coming months. For those of you who are on the line, if you're already working with the Rural Community College Alliance or are a member, would love for you to pop that into the chat. The more we know about the membership with Rural Community College Alliance, the more we're going to be able to leverage our venues and our resources. As you can see there, so we're also going to be providing some technical assistance for strategic planning with our TCUs. Again, welcome to any of the TCUs that are on the line right now. If you're interested in that, please don't hesitate to reach out or pop that into the chat. For our partners that are on the line, any types of projects that you have in play. I know American Indian College Fund has a fantastic tribal career pathway project going on right now. We're happy to leverage resources as we've done in the past. Pardon me. You can see here that we're also going to be focused on the development of a philanthropic resource library. This is building upon and scaling upon an initiative that we had over the past 3 years. Most particularly, one of the things we like to focus on is not just the technical capacity building in post-secondary and TCUs, not just the connectivity of the partnerships, but with a real keen eye recognizing that resource development and resource generation is absolutely quintessential for TCUs in order to serve their communities appropriately. We recognize I'm well informed of college funding, having been in the system for many, many years. And we know that the vast majority of the funding is going to pay the ways of just having that institution run. And so we look for grant funding. We look for funding for capital improvements in particular, right? We get a lot of opportunities for funding, and I will note this right now. Those of you who are looking at federal funding opportunities coming out, being in Department of Education, Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Commerce, I can tell you right now, and again, I'm sure this is no surprise to you, it will be focused on three things: work-based learning, including apprenticeships and any type of paid internships, but particularly those registered apprenticeships. It's going to be focused on those partnerships, and it's going to be focused on those industry relationships and getting learners into the workplace as fast as possible. So again, we're focused on about 15 to 20 states. This is going to depend on who demonstrates interest in this project. This is a short project. We usually run multi-year projects. This one's only going to be about 15 months, but it is only phase one of it. I think there might be someone here from Little Priest. And I just wanted to note, if President Patil was here, that we will definitely be including Nebraska in that philanthropic resource library. So again, we're looking to start workshops and virtual sessions around September. We will be at the Rural Community College Alliance come this September, holding a pre-conference session and several workshops introducing our rural and tribal economic toolkit. And then we'll go from there. Any questions? I'm seeing some good. Oh, thank you, Veronica. I'm seeing some good folks in the chat here. I'll just keep going a little bit because we don't want to keep you all day and want to offer you some additional information and resources that might be helpful. In our existing surveys of our tribal college and university partners, this is really what we're hearing, and you can delineate this into kind of internal concerns versus external concerns. I'd be curious to see if this resonates with you. There's concerns over faculty mapping and curriculum design. Of course, the funding I just spoke of, particularly for the capital equipment and capital improvements for career and technical education. Some concerns over academic compliance. Again, as we move into this substantial shift in academic programming at the federal level and what that means for workforce Pell, what that means for academic standards, and then of course work readiness, something that those of us in the field, we've been hearing about for decades here. And then our external concerns, again, lack of of opportunities. A lot of times in our tribal colleges and our native nations, we end up, because of the lack of opportunity, folks end up receiving their education, completing, and then having to move out of the area. So one of the things Bluestone is heavily tied to is bringing together the opportunities for economic, for career pathways, I should say, in tribal government and in tribal enterprises, somewhat alleviating that barrier that can occur because of the limited, really economy that exists on tribal lands and in rural areas. Rural remote geographic isolation rolls right into that. And then finally, the need for industry-aligned credentials. I myself have been an instructional designer for the vast majority of my career. I've taught in multiple areas at post-secondary, from mathematics to economics to applied indigenous studies, and specialize actually in the integration of industry credentials into non-credit and credit-bearing programming. I was principal investigator for the Good Jobs Challenge up in Northern Nevada, which is still rolling, and that was one of our big, big pushes. I'm a big fan of adult education and integrated education and training, where you can overlay those industry credentials. Just to give folks another little overview here, of what we're hearing from our TCU partners, reflective of the previous slide, looking at alignment and strategic integration. Again, that curriculum mapping, that mismatch between what's going on in the regional economy and what we in education are providing. And, to our own fault, we have moved forward as academics, as educators, in somewhat of a closed system over the decades. I think 2008 and the big economic recession back then was the most poignant shift in post-secondary where we really were told, hey, you need to get out there, you need to be more aligned with your economic conditions, and it's been gaining momentum ever since. Again, those strategic planning and the academic compliance that I mentioned. Of course, the infrastructure and resource scarcity. So this is why everything we do at Bluestone is going to contain particular pillars of innovation. We're going to be supporting the generation of funding and resources, not just within institutions independently, but supporting your partnership with external partners to create those more competitive applications, as well as supporting that data-driven assessment. Being able to compose those competitive statements of needs that use that data and that comparative data to really make your point, and to not just focus on federal resources, but to have a heavy focus as well on community and corporate philanthropic opportunities. We see that as a prime source and a key function as we move forward into the future, being able to provide our TCUs with the resources that they need to expand and scale programming. You heard me talk a little bit about data-informed decision making here at Bluestone. We are really, again, heavily engaged in data-driven decision making, the creation of dashboards that demonstrate local labor demand, provide aligned educational opportunities, things that are very user-friendly, things that help you with your decision making, recognizing that in post-secondary, we are so accustomed to the traditional compliance required by IPEDS, where we're looking at enrollment, retention, and completion. And here, I'm sure for those of you who have been engaged with the Aspen Institute, one of my favorite things that I learned over 12 years ago was it's not just about access and completion, it's about success after completion. And that's what's really going to drive our rural and tribal economies. You can see there kind of economic reality, the brain drain, again, lack of that local economic opportunity, and then a little bit of interest there in that nation building, right? Let's move towards an asset-based strategy rather than scarcity. That's hard to do. I can speak to that in this group, in this setting. We are all engaged with Native nations, and that continued impact of colonization occurs. That 500-year-old headache is happening in multiple elements and dimensions as we move forward in TCUs, right? And that relationship between TCUs and their local economy and the Native nation is even that much more important in 2026 to start healing that trauma, to move forward, and to take that asset-based approach. And finally, partnerships and alternative learning models. Those of you who have been with me through previous projects know I'm a huge fan of accelerated learning techniques. Again, the integrated education and training learning model combined with work-based learning, and you have to have those community and industry ties. And then, of course, how are we integrating AI as we move forward into the future? Wanted to share with you this theory of change. So I mentioned this early on. We've been mulling this over. We've been taking in input. We've been thinking about traditional economic development. I publish in the field of ecological economics and sustainable economic development. So thinking about how to engage workforce and labor with economic development is, again, an essential property for to support our Native nations and our regional economies. So we've developed these kind of three dimensions. And as you can see here, the first one is tribal government. So when we look at how TCUs can support their local economy, we want to understand how to build capacity within tribal government. Bluestone Strategy Partners works with Native nations on economic development and diversification, and has been doing so for a couple of decades. And what we're noticing over time is the increasing interest and necessity to focus on the development of human capital, quite frankly. It's something that, again, has not been a terrible focus simply because of the interruption, right, that occurred in Native nations during IRA and coming back to the center, recentering ourselves, moving towards that traditional focus of full community support, right? That has been disrupted. That was disrupted. over the past century. And so supporting Native nations and getting back in there and really supporting that human capital development is crucial and is absolutely an opportunity for all TCUs to have their learners participate in work-based learning. When you think about our career clusters, when you think about our pathways, those cross-cutting pathways of digital technology and business and leadership, business administration and leadership, those are all fantastic areas where you are already having stellar programming. We just need the connectivity to tribal government to establish these registered apprenticeships in the non-traditional space, such as finance and accounting and digital technology and IT and business administration. Secondly, our tribal enterprises. So whether it's a government-owned enterprise or a separate Section 17 enterprise, right? We want to make sure that we're supporting our tribal enterprises because that's where the investment is. So if the Native Nation is investing in, be it a casino resort or a fishery or in a hatchery or a berry farm or whatever it is, this is again the opportunity for that work-based learning, for those registered apprenticeships, for that development. So we don't always need to look outside of ourselves, outside of those tribal lands. And then finally, regional economic opportunity. We include this recognizing that not everybody is going to want to work in tribal government. Not everybody's going to want to work in tribal enterprises and what opportunities those pathways offer. So we want to ensure that there's economic opportunity and that learners are prepared and exposed to those pathways that are in demand in the regional economy. That is what's going to transition us with economic mobility. That is what's going to support the economic mobility of our learners. So tribal government, tribal enterprises, and economic opportunity in that regional economy that supports economic mobility. Those are the three dimensions that we're wholly focused on. I thank you so much. Thank you, Veronica. You're always a wealth of information. I really appreciate your notes in the chat if everybody sees that in that link. Thank you so much. Wanted to share this with you as well. This is another type of, this is an addition to that. This is how to operationalize those three dimensions, really. These are the pillars of innovations that we've been really focused on. You see there in the center, the primary factors in tribal workforce development. You see there at the top, we speak to tribal government and tribal enterprises. We speak to TCUs in that second as you start to move around clockwise. What education and training does the tribe have access to? Are there TCUs in the local area? What's going on with tribal education, WIOA, and HR offices? If you as TCUs are not engaging with those offices, that's a huge, huge opportunity missed. So again, we want to ensure that there's a continuum of engagement and partnership where perhaps people have been operating in a vacuum. And that's understandable. That's really how we've formed over the decades in education. And again, looking to break through that, move beyond the closed system and become that open system where we are truly influenced from our external impacts and our external communities. For entrepreneurship, is there a CDFI? Is there a community development financial institution that can support the capital formation needed for our entrepreneurs? Microloans, revolving microloans. When I was at my last institution, or one of my institutions, we actually were able to procure a USDA microloan fund for learners, as well as funding for an incubator. Now, again, recognizing that we are in a different federal administration, there may be a shift in funding opportunities, particularly for that capital formation in the microloan funds, but that's something we're going to keep a close eye on. Is there a tarot office? One of the things that we were able to uncover during the Good Jobs Challenge and Good Jobs Northern Nevada Initiative is this incredible wealth of partnership in our tribal tarot offices. That's our Tribal Equal Rights Ordinance offices. Again, an incredible partnership for TCUs. That's actually the train of movement that you could implement for your vocational careers, right? So your tribal equal rights offices, those are the ones that can focus on the career and technical education, particularly construction and the trades. So no need to necessarily build on to existing buildings or find your own capital. This is where I talk about the partnerships, and partnering with Tarot to provide that vocational training is an excellent, excellent opportunity that we support. And then finally, what's going on in resource development? We've already talked about that. And how are your intertribal councils engaged? If you as TCUs are not engaged in your intertribal councils, that's something that we can support for you. As you look around this, you see things like industry sector partnerships and work-based learning, entrepreneurship, small business development, regional community and economic dashboards and skills databases, tribal career navigation. We have a micro-credential in tribal career navigation that connects learners with not just your educational institution, but also the workforce system for any supportive services they need, transportation, clothing, childcare, etc. And then finally, that integrated education and training model that I keep speaking of. Those are what we're seeing as pillars of innovation around what are those primary factors in tribal workforce development. So you can kind of see where our heads are at in terms of supporting TCUs. I wanted to demonstrate this for those of you who aren't aware. Advanced CTE's Career Cluster Framework was modernized last year for the first time in over 20 years when it came out originally. This is a demonstration of that Career Cluster Framework. This is really how we start to ground the conversation. And the reason why we use this framework is because we want to be speaking apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. Our SIP codes in post-secondary don't don't align with our industry sector codes and our occupational codes. Under this new framework, they do. And there's a back end crosswalk for that. One of the things that you'll notice is different is there's no STEM cluster. So there's no STEM cluster because there's no STEM jobs. There's no STEM industry sector. And the intention of this model was to be as transparent as possible for our learners so that they understand if they do choose to major in mathematics or engineering or the sciences and biology, that their career opportunity spans multiple different industry sectors, and they will have a better direction of how to understand both the industries themselves that are each of the career clusters, as well as the subclusters, which stand for industry subclusters. You can see there an exercise we often participate in is the review of career clusters and identification of those high demand jobs and skills needed in tribal government and tribal enterprises. So you're starting to see the through line of what we do here. Just wanted to give you that list of technical services, starting with that strategic planning. And again, for those of you who are here, if you're looking for support, we do have the current project going on, funded through ECMC, and we can support you with the alignment of your strategic planning. Absolutely. I see there, Mr. Dalton Henry Dalton, you're asking how we can align this with strategic planning. Fundamentally, that is exactly what we do. So supporting that, again, I keep using that word shift, but it's that movement from traditional strategic planning in academia to a modernized approach to strategic planning. You see it somewhat aligned to your accreditation standards, but we dive a little deeper, looking at pathway design, data-driven decision making, as well as work-based learning and those partnerships. So happy to support you should you need, just please feel free to reach out. You can see here the design and implementation of apprenticeships and internship models. I personally have supported the design and setup of registered apprenticeships across all the community colleges I've worked for, and continue to do that in partnership with rural and tribal community colleges. I strongly, strongly suggest that you start to look at that relationship between you, your tribal government, and your tribal enterprises to set up these registered apprenticeships. That is where the funding is going to be for the next 3 years. You know, we've spoken about resource development. We will be hosting workshops and webinars regarding that and philanthropic opportunities. Implementing those industry sector partnerships, the closer aligned you can be with industry outside of that traditional advisory board meeting model, the better off, the more competitive you're going to be, and the more effective you're going to be for your learners. I mentioned earlier our micro-credential for tribal career navigators is always an option for you as well. Again, we support instructional design, career pathway mapping, and analysis, and the development of your own personalized tribal career pathway maps, which is a break from the norm and not simply your educational trajectory, but includes skills, wage ranges, occupations, and aligned educational trajectories, beginning with adult education in non-credit. Um, your regional labor market demand and institutional labor supply modeling, those of you who've been with us with previous projects understand what this is. This is really a modern approach to looking at demand and supply based on your learners. There was the quite compelling AHEC, economic impact studies, that all of you likely received. It's a lovely, lovely start to kind of look at what's going on and how your graduates contribute to their local economy. We take that a step further and support you in the operationalization of that economic impact analysis. I personally have been running economic impact analysis for the vast majority of my career. So it was a wonderful, wonderful treat to see that. And again, we are here to support you in the operationalization of that information. And then finally, expansion, your connectivity with local workforce development boards is absolutely essential. No man is an island, right? No college is an island, no TCU is an island. The more you engage with, and this is what we're here to do, support you in getting a seat on that workforce development board, um, the better off you're going to be, because that means you're at the table to set the agenda. You are there to support the connectivity between your learners and the co-enrollment at your TCU with the workforce system to again provide those supportive services such as clothing, shoes, childcare, etc. And then finally, we are producing a grant writing line of service as well as an economic impact analysis for TCUs as we move forward, building upon that wonderful AHEC work. I wanted to note, Veronica, again, thank you so much. Veronica put in there a link to the employer requested credentials by state and career clusters. So that's sitting right there. There's also a lovely, what's it called? Industry profile. And there's an industry profile for every single one of the career clusters. That's a real nice way to look at skills, look at zip codes, look at emerging occupations, and potential places to work. So a really, really nice resource there. And I'll end with this, just leaving you there. This is our approach. It's about strengthening Native nations, strengthening tribal economies, rural economies, strengthening your partnerships with external partners, and expanding your reach. Again, recognizing that you need resources to do that. So we need to focus on that resource generation. But in order to do that, we need to support capacity building and the implementation of these modernized techniques such as work-based learning, registered apprenticeships, accelerated learning, industry credentials, integrated education and training. I know those are a lot of words and it can seem very overwhelming. However, once we begin to work with you, we will take it step by step. And I guarantee you, we will get there. And again, informed by your institution, informed by your community, moving forward based on what that direction is, what your institution needs, what your learners need, what your communities need. Thank you so much. I open the floor now to any questions we may have. All
If
right.
you would
I'm
like to
not,
ask, if you'd like to
please
ask
go
any
ahead.
questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. I've given everyone the option to do so. So please feel free and go ahead and ask some questions.
Ah, President Patil joined us. Yes, of course. We will be sharing these slides. It's lovely to see you, President Patil. I think you may have missed the beginning of the presentation where we spoke about our current project, and we are in the midst of developing a philanthropic resource library for 15 to 20 states, and Nebraska will be at the top of that list.
Well, thank you so much. Sorry, I was in another meeting and I just happened to join a few minutes later. But pleasure to see you. And as always, you make a compelling presentation. So thank you so much for your time. And I appreciate in advance if you can share these slides to us.
Of course, of course. And you are excused as a president. All presidents here are excused for popping in late.
Thank you.
So yes, of course, of course. So Mr. Savage will be sending out a follow-up to include all of this slide as well as the recording. And my information is sitting here on this last slide. Oh, my information's not there. That was the one thing I forgot to change, but that's okay. This goes straight to our chairman and founder, Mr. Jamie Fulmer, who many of you met at our last convening. But that said, again, we will be sending this out. And please note, we are going to be producing those surveys. For those of you who aren't already engaged with the Rural Community College Alliance, we'll make sure that you get those surveys separately and distinctly. And for those of you who are, you're going to be receiving those through the RCCA. And let's see here. And if you're interested again in any type of contextualized technical assistance, particularly for strategic planning right now, that's really our focus. Recognizing that there's a lot of other ways a lot of interest in implementation. And with regard to work-based learning, etc., we can absolutely support that as well. But for right now, we're a little focused on the strategic planning to start with those action steps, if that makes sense. Um, I see some questions in here. Let's see. Did Haskell? We have not submitted the survey yet. So Haskell will absolutely be included, as will what is it? The Southwest Indian Polytechnic Institute, our two partner BIE institutions. So Haskell will absolutely be receiving this. Mr. Dalton Henry, or Henry Dalton, I'm so sorry, I don't know which one it is. Either way, if you are the person that we should be submitting this to, please let us know. If not, we will find your institutional researcher or your president and make sure that they receive that survey. Okay. All right, with that, it's 9:42. I'm sure you could all use an extra 3 minutes in your day. We thank you so much for being here today. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And we're looking forward to working with you as we move into the future, expanding and scaling the reach, impact, and effectiveness of TCUs. Have a great day.